It is almost 10 o'clock. All right. Now, all right. Okay, so, there's several things that I'm procrastinating on right now, such as a schedule I need to make for myself. I want to talk today about a couple of different things. First and foremost, the biggest, most significant thing is, it has to do with, now that this Mars retrograde season is coming to an end. Let's see if I can get my fingers down a little bit. Ready? 1, 2, good. That'll have to be enough. Okay. Just hold them down. Hold them back up again. Okay, that will have to be enough. That's what I say to myself. Because I have these little compulsions. That'll have to be enough too. Okay. So, I'm trying to curve stuff, and right now, a lot of those issues that you've been dealing with for the past 7 months now are going to be over, because what is today? But today is the Ides of the month, 15th. And Mars is leaving behind Mars retrograde season. So it's going to move into 26 degrees of Aries today. Very exciting. That is the Taurus degree. So there's some sensual elements to this. And then tomorrow Venus is changing signs as well. So we're dealing with that shift of energy. Venus moving into its home sign of Taurus. It's going to settle things down. Where we can become more sensual and more stable in a kind of relationship, where we want a relationship that's long-lasting. And it's all about enjoying the finer things in life with Venus and Taurus. Venus and Taurus, very, attracted to various forms of beauty. And if there is a Venus retrograde in Taurus, I'm sure that it's probably a little bit more difficult. A little bit like you want to go out and buy all these kind of things, But if you touch the grapes and you eat a grape in that particular underground place, the monster with the eyes and everything and the claws is going to come alive and start chasing you. The same goes with touching a flower. You think it's a flower, but then it starts consuming you because it's a monstrous vine that you've seen. Because I've seen monstrous vines in several films, like vines that come to life. And I've seen it's in Jumanji, it's in Scooby Doo. I think it's in a couple other things. It was in Gregor, a novel, Gregor the Overlander. For those at my Amentrn who were here in 2018, that summer we devoted a huge part of that to looking at the Underland Chronicles, and there was a scene in the third book. I haven't finished the series yet. But there was a scene in that third book where Gregor was touching a kind of a flower, and the vine started to consume him, and all this kind of things like that out of the jungle. And that was a really hot jungle, and it was so far down underground, and that was going on. But then it all sort of became all for naught, and then they discovered something back in United, that whole story. But anyway, so today we are officially moving on from Mars retrograde. Mars retrograde season is now coming to an end. Mars is moving into new territory. That's what I wanted to talk to you about today. Today, we're going to reflect on that. And you're going to be writing or making a video where you are reflecting on Mars retrograde and how it was for you. So that's what you'll be doing. And thinking about previous Mars retrogrades, I was thinking a lot, yesterday about 9 years ago. I just wanted to say this. Maybe I'll insert this. Maybe I'll do a astrology trivia segment in my forecast videos. Maybe I'll do a little something unique, and maybe if I do a video about Mars in Libra later this year, then I'll talk about how Mars was retrograde in Libra 9 years ago today. At this time, this day, 9 years ago, Mars would have been retrograde in Libra. And I was watching a video about that. So, for those who were here at my Amentrn, or for those who remember how I was back in 2014, I was very different than I am now. Now I believe in just being authentic. That whole pretend thing is just, I'm so done with that. But at the time, I was a little bit hard to get, and maybe a little bit more difficult to take seriously because of how I presented myself in the way that I did. But nonetheless, you had to take me seriously regardless. And so I was looking up on the natal chart, on a natal chart calculator, and I was seeing how from March 1st through May 19th or 20th, Mars was retrograde in Libra. And that particular period of time was a very good, positive period of time in my life. That stretch of time that Mars was retrograde. Um, and if I could break down the different kind of phases of, um, the year of 2014, it started differently than it ended, in the sense that it started out being really positive and things came together very beautifully, and things were very good, and I was experiencing a lot of highs, especially June, July of that particular year. That was going on, and I went to Boston, and there was all those adventures from that particular trip. That was the year when the North Node moved into Libra that year in February, and just days after that, Mars went retrograde in Libra. And I think that that's just profound, how Mars can go retrograde in the sign that it is opposite, yet it is the same sign that the North Node is in. And the fact that Mars is retrograding in Libra in the springtime, and the Sun's not in Libra in the springtime, and it's during Aries season also. So, at the time, the greatest sense of happiness and fulfillment would come to relating to others, commitment, compromise, collaboration, balance. That's going to be very different than what's coming up in July for us. Yet, it's not going to be too different, because we are trying to balance the North and the South. It's both and. We're trying to balance both the North and the South, but the North Node is in the sign, and that is where we need to head towards. And so we need to balance out the higher vibration qualities of the South Node to reach the North Node. But, the truth is the North Node is where we need to go, because that matters where the South Node and North Node are placed. So it's really, that's what's going on. At the time, I remember seeing Charitalia, that show, that cooking show with Marina Esposito, and other things. But, Mars retrograde, even though people say how difficult it is, that was actually a very positive time in my life. And then, later on in the year, starting in September of that year through May of next year, that was a period that was very different. It was very negative. And that was when I was in a relationship to my teacher. And maybe I will have one of the astrologers here do an astrology reading, both the horoscope of this teacher and what was going on in her life and what was going on in my life at that particular time frame that I met her and encountered her and was in a relationship with her. Now, I've spoke about it many times. And I've also spoken about before how at the time the South Node was in Aries. And, if I'm just sort of picking apart that particular aspect of what was going on and just labeling it as the be-all, end-all, that in and of itself would be huge. I found out that my teacher was not in Aries, but she was a Sagittarius, born on December 17th, 1962. Because I was seeing one of her Facebook posts, and she was turning 60. And if you don't know or don't remember what she looks like, I know there were people here a couple of years ago at my event when she was on an Oprah show like thing, and we were chatting, and bringing stuff up because Mercury was retrograde in Gemini. The same Mercury retrograde that I left her and left that relationship. And I didn't realize that till recently. I think that that's so huge. So, of course, permission to look back, permission to go back over stuff, permission to settle beefs with people. And that's especially when you get into Venus retrograde. Anyway, so interesting the moon and the sun don't go retrograde. But anyway, you know, she was born that particular day. I am going to have somebody do, a reading. And she has, I think, Sun in Sagittarius, Moon in Virgo, so square going on, Mercury in Capricorn. And now, I will say that I am not an expert in what Maria de Simone, for example, is an expert in. She is all about predictive astrology, and I am not going to pretend to be an expert in something that I am not. So I think that I'm going to hand it over to her when it comes to speaking about those different types of things. And I'm going to admit that. I think one of my big pet peeves is when people come to me thinking that I am the expert and sort of expecting me to give expert information. Well, let me just have the courage to be honest. I'm not an expert. Don't have this idea that I know so much. I will give you what I know, but do not be disappointed or surprised if there's this kind of limitation to it. And I think that's probably my Chiron in Capricorn, is maybe when people come to me and sort of reward me for something that I don't feel that I deserve. Maybe that's part of Chiron in Capricorn. But, if I feel in that kind of situation where I don't feel comfortable and I honestly don't know exactly what I'm doing and I'm not an expert and I don't have the tools to teach people, I will say, guess what? I'm not going to do this for you. I'm not going to show you this. I'm not going to explain this because I will not be able to do it in a way that I can refer you to somebody else to do it. Unless, I'm proud of something that I produce or, a video or something that, I want to share. But, I'm certainly not a narcissistic or vain personality type. That's not who I am. So, anyway. This person has Venus in Scorpio, and I'm just going to say this, and just to really, I wouldn't say this about Venus in Aries, but I'm just going to say very generally that it is an astrological fact that Venus is considered to be in detriment in Scorpio, because what is Venus but love? It wants all things beauty. It's kind, it's sensual, it wants to harmonize, it wants to be loving and kind and all those kind of things. And Scorpio, is sort of soft. There's a softness quality, and Scorpio is very different, where it can be very real and we want the truth, very into dark stuff, and passionate in relationship, wanting a relationship that is, hugely transformative. It is profound. It's a powerful kind of relationship where the partners are at intimacy of soul, and I would be remiss not to mention sex when it comes to Venus and Scorpio. Is something, a lot of stuff going on with, sexual kind of things going on, because that's an important element of, Scorpio, because of the part of the body that it rules and other stuff like that. That's what I'm going to say, willingly, and openly. So, Jupiter, was in Pisces, so that's very positive placement for Jupiter. I wish that I got that Jupiterian energy in Pisces when I was in a relationship with that person, but I certainly got the Venus in Scorpio. Again, I don't want to sound colloquial with this information at all, so I hope that I don't sound that way. But I was noticing a couple of different things. First of all, the sun was in trine with Mars, so the sun in Sagittarius and trining Mars in Leo. Mars in Leo has a lot of courage and a lot of, drive. And so Sun and Mars, the two sort of masculine energies coming together, is really, Mars is physical, assertive, and that was who this person was. And even, I wouldn't say aggressive, certainly not physically. Verbally, very firm, very intense. That's another Scorpio quality in Venus as love in Scorpio is intense. Abby Lee Miller, who, if you've seen her, then if you have seen her in Dance Moms, that is a more extreme, far more extreme version of my 5th grade teacher. But she was somewhat like her. Both of them, so I'm going to use her name. Her name is Jolene Mort. Saying her name is kind of feels almost taboo because her name is the last syllable in Voldemort, in which I was starting to watch Harry Potter at the time, and I just think that's huge. Both my 5th grade teacher, who, whose name is Mrs. Mort, and Abby Lynn Miller, both of their last names begin with an M. Both of them have Venus in Scorpio. You can find out information about Venus in Scorpio. I'll give the gist. This person, my teacher, also has the moon conjunct, or moon conjunct Pluto. Moon-Pluto conjunction. And, the moon is emotional, deals with, sort of how you, react emotionally, although that's more Martian qualities. The moon is feeling, nurturing, and nurturing others. It's, your emotional nature. And Pluto is, very destructive, very transformative, a very powerful energy. And this person did have a lot of power. And I admired the kind of power that she had. And I sort of wished that I could pretend to, I was very, I just was very, wowed and very amazed and drawn to this kind of power, even though I rejected qualities of, this person. I did have to say that it was admirable. It really was. And it was admirable that it was also, negative, very shadow sides in certain zodiac signs. So, that was going on too. And then the other thing that I have to say to this is, let me think, what was I going to say? This is somebody who I was kind of shying away from in relationship. And, and there were a couple times, one particular time was when she was asking me, why do you pause after everything I said? Well, because she was very intimidating and very scary, and I was feeling very uncomfortable and very very under pressure and is, really low vibration energies that she was putting out, and so many different things like that. She, really pulled a lot of people down, and myself at an energetic level. I've spoken before about Mr. Tyson, and he came to my Amentrn. That is one thing. This was another. And if you were to put those in comparison, um, yeah, so it was very uncomfortable, and a negative experience, and all the good things that happened in the context of that classroom, and the field trips that we went on, because there were a lot of field trips that we went on, probably more than any other year, and all this stuff, it was all tainted by this particular person. And not that necessarily, but how she was treating her students, but it's more along the lines of being firm and being super intense when it comes to anger, and all that kind of thing. Now, I want to move on now. I want to move on to, since we're talking about all things related to this, and Mars also ties in, so these two things kind of tie in to each other. I'm just going to review. These are my notes that I had way back in August that I used for my video that I filmed on Mars and Gemini. I'm going to just buzz through what's relevant here. So recall, August 20th, Mars entered Gemini, 0 degrees, and then 14 days later, 16 days later, September 5th, which was Labor Day weekend, that was the time frame that Mars stepped into shadow, the pre-shadow, because remember that it's going to retrace, or going to reflect. It's going to move through territory, and just like a shadow, it reflects back. So you're moving back. So you have to take in consideration the shadow before and after, because you have to consider the territory and the degrees. So 8 to 25 degrees Gemini. Then it started slowing down, moving beyond its normal time frame for being in a certain sign, and then 56 days later, on October 30th, it slowed down, stationed to go retrograde, and that was the weekend that I went to see the day before I saw Fiddler on the Roof, and I certainly would go back and have a do-over of that experience with how I better with step. But all the issues I've been working with during this whole time are getting resolved. But so anyway, so as we know, it entered retrograde October 30th, January 12th is stationed direct, and whenever a planet stations, its energy is heightened. Where people are feeling more, assertive, more kind of, there's a feisty energy with the planet stationing, because its qualities become really pronounced for us during a certain 2 to 3 days, especially when that planet stations and turns a direction, either retrograde or direct. So January 12th, it moved direct, and now it's moving shadow. Now it's leaving 25 degrees of Gemini behind, entering the latter degrees of Gemini, and then March 25th, it'll move on to Cancer, and I'll do a video about that on my YouTube channel. Hopefully it will be shorter than others, because that's huge. And that'll be going on 2 days after Pluto goes into Aquarius, and of course there'll be people that will be on the trip to Joka at the time Mars enters Cancer and Pluto goes to Aquarius. So, several things I discussed with that video was, let me do this again. I can't believe I have to do this. 1, 2, 3, 4, done. Okay, so a couple of things I had to, discussed in my video is that Gemini is a mental sign. It deals with brain sort of cognitive functions. The first air sign, the zodiacs, are obviously dealing with that. It's highly intellectual too. Very intellectual, very communicative sign. And another thing I mentioned is that Gemini is like a chameleon. It's very adaptable. Sort of, we're pulling things from over here and over there. Colin Bedell, who is just at my Amentrn, unofficially though, but at my Amentrn, is a Gemini. He sort of pulls different references from over here and over there. So very adaptable. But that's sort of another thing. Versatile. That's what I was looking for. So, adaptable. Sort of taking, here's what we can do to occupy ourselves in our immediate environment. And variety, too. Not one thing, not a 9-to-5 job for a huge part of your life. That's not ideal. Unless that job, there's both the structure to it and the variety to it. So there's a balance, just like Gemini and the twins, and there's a dual nature. So one's, structured, I guess you could say, the other is unstructured. So that's sort of the Gemini twins. And the symbol becomes very important. And not only that, but it adds another layer to, to the sign of Gemini, which makes it specific because I feel like Gemini gets put into a box of just being thinking, communication, all those kind of things, and you want to separate out Gemini from Mercury. And you can do that especially when you talk about the symbolism of Gemini. So, and it rules over your childhood stage of life where you're communicating, and you're looking over this flower, and you're asking a million questions and learning and studying and opening up your mind and eyes and ears and your senses to the world. So, rules that sort of open stage too. And so Mars, when it moved into Gemini, there was kind of a, like your focus was like this when Mars in Taurus previously. Because Taurus really, fixed, set in a particular direction, and then went like this. So your focus